Okay, off you go.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Joan Mulvihill, and thank you so much for registering and joining us this afternoon for, I think this is the 6th of the IVI webinar series for 2020. I think I have been the host now for 4 of them, so really delighted to be back today, particularly for such an exciting and interesting topic, organizational agility, enabling digital transformation. Obviously, digital transformation, a subject very close to my heart, and I'm delighted that the IVI have chosen it as a focus for today's effort, because you know, we can talk about technology a lot, but in the end of the day, everything just happens through people. And we have 3 great people and organizational leadership gurus to help us through this afternoon's session. First of our speakers is Kevin Empey, the founder and managing director of WorkMatters, followed ably by Dr. Jean Cushen, lecturer and director of postgraduate teaching and learning at Maynooth University Business School. Obviously, this is brought to us by the IVI, which reside in Maynooth University. So one of their own, and really looking forward to that. And then finally, one of my gurus and heroes, Mr. Finn Goulding, enterprise agile leadership expert and author of a number of books at this stage. So they're going to take us through this afternoon through a series of presentations. If you have any questions that you'd like to put to any speaker in particular, please feel free to put them in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and either the speakers will answer them throughout, or they may choose, if they want to open it up to the whole panel, we will leave them and do it as part of the panel discussion at the end. So that will run from 3:10 to 3:30, and then we will have you on for the rest of your day. So without further ado, I am going to move along and introduce you first of all to Kevin Empey, founder and managing director of WorkMatters, working in this space, international consulting and training firm for many years, helping business leaders, HR leaders and their organizations thrive in what is a very changing world. I will not say any more on that because I do not want to take any of his time. So Kevin, over to you.
Many thanks, Joan. Appreciate it. And hi, everybody. Thank you to IVI for holding today's really interesting topic. And my segment of it, I suppose, is kicking off with what I call the agility challenge. And really, I'm coming at this from kind of an organization, I suppose, people perspective, and really just want to share some observations and thoughts with you about that. So originally my background is in technology, actually, and then pretty much by accident ended up in really the people, the change and leadership side of things, probably for the last 25 years or so. And with a particular focus in the last 10 years, particularly around the whole future of work area, and what that actually means in very practical terms at organization and people level. And really on the whole digital transformation kind of side of things too. And I guess that has naturally brought me into the agility space. And that's what I'm going to be sharing some thoughts with you here on actually trying to make sense of that and helping people with the sort of more practical sides of that. So that's my kind of background. And what I thought I would just do is share some thoughts with you on this topic from a couple of perspectives, at an organizational level, the department level, team level, the individual level, and indeed the leadership perspective, just to kind of a whirlwind tour on that, and then hand over to Jean. I guess, look, I certainly don't need to be explaining the backdrop and the context of this group of people, but I suppose the future of work, it's a topic, it's a very interesting one. It actually has no meaning. There is no definition of the future of work that's at least universally known. It's a label of convenience, isn't it, for everything from robotics to AI to other forces as well going on in the changing world of work in terms of demographics and societal changes as well, and not to mention pandemics thrown into the mix, general disruption in the world of work. But underpinning that, like other industrial revolutions, if you like, past, is obviously a triggering around technology, not for the first time. And I suppose this idea, this Van Geest piece really just brings it home to me, is this exponential rate of change around the technology agenda, where we're seeing not just linear increases in scale in terms of adoption of new technologies, but actually by 100-folds over the last and 1,000-folds over the last 10 years. And the other point I think that comes up here too is the convergence of different technologies as well. So that's brought us square into this digital transformation era, I guess, along with all these other things going on. And I guess when I talk about the digital transformation challenge or agenda with folks, I'm struck by this, and as well said by Joan at the beginning, that actually this stuff by Gartner, where tends to be or has been at least traditionally seen as, oh, is this a technology issue? If we're talking about putting in a digital transformation agenda, oh, it's a technology issue. And indeed, the leaders around the executive table sometimes have that sense as well. 67% of questions from leaders concerned about the technology side of things. And only 33% really asking questions about what's underneath the surface, which is of huge impact. And I guess when you start looking at the human dimension of this, the organizational dimension, there are many sort of, I guess, battlefronts or must-win battles in how this, how digital transformation can land or should land properly in organizations, and indeed these other, how we're handling, for instance, pace of change, how we're handling complexity, not just the technology, but these other things, how we're handling uncertainty, not to mention where we are right now. And in my experience, and when you really look at this deeply, one of the sort of must-win battles or capabilities, if you like, that it always comes up in every conversation eventually is this topic of agility. And, well read, well understood for many years. And it's certainly no stranger to this group, agility. Here we go again. We've been talking about this for, if not 20 years more. But I guess what a proposition to you is that the rest of the organization is catching up on you and your thoughts around agility and the need for agility. And that's what I really want to talk about, is that sort of organizational context. And it's interesting, that last quote from McCann and Selsky there, talking about agility along with resilience, key to people being able to adapt to increasingly in turbulent times. And that study came out actually of the last big recession, 2008, 10, 11, when those organizations, teams and individuals who seemed to fare best out and recover best and bounce back from the last big recession were those with these combination of talents. So agility is worth looking at, basically, and is worth putting our mind to, and it's certainly no stranger to us here. But the issue is that's easy to say, and that's a word that's thrown around. It causes quite a lot of trouble for a little word. What do you mean? What is it? I can tell you there's workshop walls full of people's different interpretations of what it actually means in reality. And that's what I want to talk to you about. And I guess terminology is important. And sometimes, for instance, resilience and agility, you hear it being used, these terms being used interchangeably. And I certainly hear a lot about resilience right now, obviously. And I know Jean's going to talk about this topic in more detail. But this is just a sort of a visual and a definition, or a distinction, if you like, that I tend to find useful. That resilience being that capacity to absorb and recover and rebound, if you like, to plan for and persist in difficult. It's the survive piece. It's that sort of gritty ability to be able to hold on, to be able to see things through. Whereas the agility, I suppose, rather than the roots of this tree holding on, is the canopy part, which is much more open to the world. It's about that ability to sense and respond, to adapt. It's kind of has a sense of movement and progress and growth and continuous kind of improvement, etc. So, I just find that these terms are bandied around, and I'm afraid, as I talk to many leadership teams and HR teams about this stuff, we need to talk about it. We need to get under the skin of what does it mean, because it can't just live or thrive just by being, okay, let's be agile. Well, what do you mean? It's not like a light switch that we can just turn on and off. What do we mean about it, and what does it look like? And of course, no stranger to you, this concept, but that can be one of the misconceptions can be that it's all about dynamic and flexible and nimble, but I think we all know on this call that no, it is a combination of that, but also this kind of stability, this stable backbone, if you like. But even that sounds kind of okay, get it, conceptually, that's fine, but when do you want me to be stable and when do you want me to be flexible? Am I going to be flexible on Tuesdays and stable on Wednesday. How does it work? You know, and I think this is where some of the kind of paradox around agility and some of the difficulties at human level arise around some of the definition of this. I often use this analogy of the skier, I think, because it's helpful. I mean, like the skier who needs to kind of really concern themselves with the here and now, needs to be able to adapt to what's in front of them, needs to be able to adjust very, very quickly, otherwise going to get knocked over by an obstacle or whatever. Needs to, at the same time, have the ability to scan and sense what's on the horizon, what's coming up. Otherwise, skiers would just go off a cliff, right? So it's that kind of, you know, dual and ambidextrous ability to be able to react and to kind of focus on the here and now, but also to also look forward and sense and scan what's kind of coming around. And, you know, so we get into it. And when you start to break it down, one of the things at organizational level you find being necessary is the need to look at it at system level. That I was working with a team, for instance, they were a kind of a local technology team, insurance sector, and they were doing fine. They had all the processes, all the kind of procedures, the methodologies, they were humming it. They were really knocking it out of the park at team level. But what they were really struggling with was that they were kind of working against a headwind, if you like, you know, in terms of the wider organization, decision-making processes, structures, HR processes, the very culture of the organization outside their unit just wasn't, if you like, being favorable to what they were trying to do in terms of release of new products and customer responsiveness. So we had to have some tough conversations about that, and about, even though the leadership team were thinking, yeah, we're agile because, you know, that's in our brand and we like to think of ourselves as agile, but actually the culture was waterfall. And indeed at the other end of the level, that, you know, even people in the technology team were struggling with some of the realities, if you like, or implications of working in an agile way in terms of having to tack differently, to continuous retrospectives, continuous improvement. It was just exhausting. And I know of several teams at the moment who are probably close to burnout on this. And so from a human and organizational perspective, it's interesting just to look at this across the piece. And of course, wrapping around that is the leadership agenda. How do we as leaders manage that systems view, if you like, and try to compensate and see where some of the fault lines. So I've found that virtually every conversation I have on agility, both the problem and the solution is somewhere on this page, if you like. So the first level to talk about it is organizational level, and you know, we've got a way of looking at that called scope, where we just have an initial conversation with teams to say, listen, how agile are you when you look at your agility through these different lenses that I've just been talking about? And in fact, we're doing the second phase of this tool is being developed with IVI right now, in terms of really understanding agility at its highest level, if you like. The fault lines might be between where we are and where we need to be, not where we want to be from an aspirational perspective, but where we need to be from a business perspective. And look, this is just a case where a high level of feedback from one organization where, compared to 100%, which was where they needed to be, they were actually doing not too bad on the strategic side. They were pretty much committed to adaptiveness, innovation, agility, etc. They had some very innovative things going on in the market with their suppliers, etc. Where they were getting stuck was in the organizational and some of the people side that were still, if you like, in traditional command and control type of culture setting, 20th century, if you like, versus 21st. So that's one lens in which you can look at this organizational agility challenge. Another area then is, well, you take that to department level. And I spend a fair bit of time too with HR teams trying to figure out, well, what does this agility topic mean for you? And what are the implications for you? And when you think of digital transformation, how are you showing up in this? How are you helping to lead and support various aspects of digital transformation? What is the impact from a HR perspective? And to work out with them where they maybe need to change their habits and behaviors and their processes and their mindset in terms of how they support the organization. And that one towards the bottom, that one can be quite difficult, is they're used to an area of, you know, delivering programs to customers and to their organization. Whereas this idea about co-creation, collaboration, adaptability, flexibility, these are concepts that are not necessarily easy. And as one HR director said to me, Kevin, he said, look, we were tasked with one HR coming up with standard processes, consistency. We need to, in some cases, for employment law, etc. So we come from a history of command and control, and that's what we've been asked to do. And now it's hard necessarily to kind of to make a switch overnight to a more agile way. But we sort of work through that. And I think the relationship actually between technology and HR is one of those new frontiers we're going to see more of in years to come, where IT really need HR, I think, in terms of dealing with some of the organizational issues with digital transformation. But HR sure as hell need IT in terms of some of their digital journey. So it gets quite interesting when you work on the agility challenge at department level, and the same with sales and the same with procurement. What I want to just touch on, though, is my sense when you're talking about agile cultures is that at some stage you've got to get to that individual level. And what does agility mean at individual level? We can put in processes and systems and operational models, etc. But unless people really believe in the benefit and the implications for them and buy into that, we're going to struggle, aren't we? So that's one of the areas we concentrate on quite a lot, is what does this look like at individual level? And you know, it is a tough time in terms of being an employer right now. You're being told to be agile. Well, what do you mean? On top of everything else you're asking me to do, and indeed dealing with COVID and other things. Because, you know, you'd have hoped that maybe the world of work would be something like this at this stage, that the robots would be taken over and we'd be able to let the algorithms take care of the mundane parts of our work. But I think, you know, we'd all agree that probably work for a lot of people feels probably more like this, particularly these days. And indeed, you know, kind of a worrying, concerning time that, you know, employees will tell you, gosh, I'm just struggling to keep afloat here, you know, let alone what the future is going to bring. So what we're talking about in terms of personal agility or individual agility is helping people to not control the waves and the elements, but actually to navigate them and to cope with them and to hopefully thrive on them, and to really understand what all this might look like for them. And that's something we've done over the last few years, is really understand what are the qualities and the attributes of individual agility. And so we researched this over a couple of years. And these, when you ask people, tell me what agility looks like at individual level in behavioral terms, these dimensions. And I'll share this paper with you in the chat. Won't go through it all in detail now, but I remember, for instance, a story where one individual was saying to me, he was in a part of a work team that was automating his own job. And I kind of said, is there not a bit of a downside in this project that you're on? And he said, no, I'd much prefer to be inside this process, really understanding what's going on. His learning mindset, his openness to change, his acceptance of change, his purposefulness. He was very purpose-led, self-led. He had those kind of skills whereby he was really steady and clear on what he was trying to do and where he stood. And because of having those individual skills, he was well able to deal with the collaboration and the relationship management, the stuff that we see on the social domain. So I won't go over it too much now, but just to say that I think we're seeing more attention on this issue of what does agility look like at individual level and how can we support people move from where they are to where they need to be. The final point I'd make is on leadership agility. And I think it's, as I said earlier, the kind of wrapper of everything and what are leaders doing to encourage agility and to help with this. And, you know, the quote there says it all, but you know, a model like this, I suppose, and you find in the leadership development space that a lot of leadership development going in probably the same direction and saying, look, it's not about being an expert anymore. It's about being more a facilitator, that level 3 there. And this is a leadership model that's developed with agile in mind, with agility in mind, basically making the point that you're going to have to need a few hats. You know, sometimes the expert leader, that hat is needed at times, but more and more so, you're seeing the need for this more servant leader approach, facilitative, helping people get on with it. One leader put it to me like this. He said, I'm learning on how to maybe transition from being a very hierarchical, layered and traditional manager like the ham sandwich to being something more like a burrito leader, where I'm trying to create the framework, I'm trying to create the stability for the team, but actually inside, I can't stay on top of every single decision that's been made. I've got to let them get on with it. And that's where the magic happens. So there's implications for leaders here in terms of their own journey on how to create an agile culture. So look, that's it from me. I guess the main messages are that this agility, it's not new, and it's certainly not new to people in this call, but I'm certainly seeing it becoming more a deliberate and more widely applied capability for the changing world, a more accepted one that organizations are waking up to the need that it needs to be part of the DNA now. And it needs to be stitched in, and we need to work on, where the fault lines and where the practical implications are. We need to be very clear about what it actually means at organizational and other levels as well, and particularly the individual level. So I hope maybe these remarks might just help you think about a little bit of how agile are you or your teams, and maybe that's going to help in terms of your digital transformation journeys and other changes you have in your organization. Thanks, Joan.
Thank you very much for that, Kevin. That was really great. I'm going to hang on to for the rest of the day the line that it's not about being an expert, but a facilitator. And as I can say, I am not one of the 3 expert speakers on this call. I am the facilitator. Mm-hmm. So I have found my role in life. This is great. Sorry, I should turn my camera back on for anyone who has joined us later. Excuse me. As your facilitator for the afternoon, I want to thank Kevin very much. As I say, if you have any questions for him, pop them in the little Q&A section at the bottom. And without further ado, I'm going to swap from, or someone is going to swap from Kevin over to our next speaker, Dr. Jean Cushen of Maynooth, lecturer and director of the Postgraduate Teaching and Learning program in the business school, and talking to us about cultivating resilience. So Jean, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Joan, and thanks, Kevin, for that session also, and hello to everybody, and thanks for joining us today. So Kevin spoke a lot about agility and the significance of the importance of that, and that's a view that we all share. I'm going to focus more on resilience, and I'm sure when people talk about agility, the word resilience often follows quite quickly behind that. So I will try to unpack what resilience actually is. So we're really looking at the people side of digital transformation here today. And we think that's important, not just because we are interested in HR, but also because all of the research and the evidence base on how organizations realize value from digital technologies show that a key differentiator between success and failure is the extent to which organizations are investing in their people along the way. And some great work and a really strong evidence base for that is emerging from MIT in the States, and they have an initiative on the digital economy. And Professor Eric Brynjolfsson over there really looks at the investment patterns of high technology firms. And in particular, he's interested in the role of intangible assets, people being in organizations probably most significant intangible asset. And in monitoring all the investments of high technology firms and doing an analysis of that against the subsequent financial performance of those firms shows that for organizations, for every dollar that they spend in hardware and software, they need to spend close to $4 on the intangible assets. And by intangible assets, they talk about that being business process, along with managers and employees investing in their development, investing in their technological development, their certifications, their vendor training. And even though those organizations don't necessarily see a short-term increase in productivity, sometimes it can take 3 to 4 years, what is happening in the technology sector is that less and less of companies are making enough financial investments in their employees to realize the value of their technological investments. And actually, amongst the OECD, there's a concern that organizations are losing the ability to cultivate the people advantage. And that's not just HR's fault. HR are constantly seeking more resources. There's the role of financial markets and kind of short-termism in business returns are creating pressures there. But it is increasingly important to have faith in people. And again, the evidence base on the returns that organizations are achieving from digital transformation really show that it won't happen without significant investment in people. And that's what cultivating resilience is about. So in this, rapidly changing world, in this agile space, how do leaders, how do businesses be a signpost rather than a weather vane? And I'm borrowing that quote from Tony Benn, the radical politician who was advocating for very dramatic societal change, but that really was, his message, be a signpost, don't be a weather vane. And I think that's quite appropriate for getting that balance right between change and doing work well. So what is resilience in the literature? So my screen is being a bit slow to respond. So while I'm waiting for my keyboard to keep up with me, as Kevin mentioned, it's about overcoming something, some kind of duress, some kind of adversity, some kind of difficulty. And so, and how people respond to it, how organizations respond to it, and how they bounce back. And when you look at all those definitions and all the talk about hardship, it kind of sounds awful. Who wants to be resilient? Who wants to go through all this duress and adversity? But the literature on resilience and all the history of it shows that it's not about just toughening up and dealing with something after the fact. It's about cultivating the kind of organizational processes, the kind of mindset that means that when change occurs, when threats, organizational threats become visible, that they aren't interpreted as negatively as they might be in another organization that doesn't have that mindset and that doesn't have those processes. So how do you prevent an organizational inertia? And I'm really hoping that my screen keeps up with me here.
Jean, maybe it'd be an idea just to stop sharing and just try it again. I think Kevin had something similar at the start and that worked for him.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so this should do it for me now. Okay, so I presented here an overview of resilience in the business management literature, and I won't spend too much time looking at the past, but really I'll pull out the concepts that have remained constant in what we understand resilience to be within firms. So it first emerged in the 80s with the economic shocks that were occurring at that time. And a lot of the shocks were external. There's a lot of industrial unrest, there's a lot of financial unrest, and really was about an organization's ability to absorb external shocks and to overcome threat rigidity. So it really always has been discussed in the context of change and dealing with change. So how do organizations not become rigid, not freeze in the face of change and in the face of a threat? And a key finding amongst the literature and amongst the research that was done at that time was that organizations need some level of slack resources for incident management. So being too efficient, being too close to the bone in your manpower, in your skills, can actually cause some kind of operational dysfunction within firms. And a lot of the studies were done in hospital settings and medical settings, but it transferred quite well into more industrial settings at that time. So the real focus was on operational resilience. How do organizations make sure that no matter what happens, they can still get the work done? That evolved into more strategic resilience as different businesses began to be more complex, more technologically complex, and in particular with the emergence of the nuclear industry, with airlines becoming more pervasive, the threats to organizations began to be more internal. So how all those micro level processes that must connect seamlessly together, how do you make sure that nothing fails along the way? And the key theories of resilience then emerged, the concept of moving away from the normal accident. So something going wrong is not normal. It can't be seen as normal. So how do you have high reliability change? So they weren't talking necessarily about agility then, or even adaptiveness, but reliable change. So making sure that the world doesn't fall apart as you upgrade, as you change, as you become more technologically complex. In the 90s, that evolved into more looking beyond the process side of things and beyond the checklists and the constant form filling into more cultural resilience, the appreciation of the collective mind of the organization. And a lot of the research in that time was done on teams. So the significance of the team connection to respond to a threat. So they some fascinating cases done on air traffic control, pilots and in the military, and about how in those moments where a new threat, perhaps an unpredictable threat, was put in front of those people, that inertia was suppressed, and they engaged in this process of active information processing, sharing, communication, and quick response. And so there is that incidence of responsiveness, but there is always a preoccupation with novel failures. As the technology was evolving, what are the novel failures that could emerge, and how do people plan for those? But again, some slack in the system, some resource slack, so manpower was understood to be essential to having that ability to respond. At the change of century, particularly with some quite significant societal trauma, 9/11, the focus on psychological resilience began to gain traction. So building resilience through people's strengths and through efficacy. And again, this idea of resilience being something that you nurture, that you don't just tell people to be more resilient and to toughen up, but you actually cultivate people's strengths. You invest in their strengths, make them feel like they have an ability to deal with threats and to overcome them, and that they do have, there are reasons to be optimistic. And within the workforce, it was about nurturing the good in people, identifying the drivers of workplace optimism, hope, and strength. And so with that idea that it happens at the micro psychological level came resilience training, this idea that that training people is one part of what it takes for an individual and a team and an organization to become more resilient. And then today, with the, as was mentioned earlier, with the financial crisis, we began to talk about resilience and context, particularly of agility. So organizations having this anticipating bridge. So the constantly anticipating, again, it's all being resilient is always about preparing, and while maintaining a steady state of well-being. So in the face of all these threats, there's a sense of well-being, there's a sense of strength and efficacy and an ability to respond. The research shows that the density and frequency of adversity has quite significant implications. And at the moment, we're kind of dealing with quite a dense period of adversity with the pandemic, but also with the constant change that's still going on within organizations. There's some change is quite frequent, but it's about ensuring that that change isn't perceived as something that's adverse to individual interests. That's really important. And again, that requires the resource investments in people's development, in people's abilities and in their roles, and a real belief in transformational leadership. So I might, my screen still likes to, I might stop sharing and just move things on again manually, if that's okay. And so within psychological literature, a lot of that has been repeated, and it corresponds again with what Kevin was talking about. The drivers or the resilience enhancers that are been measured quantitatively, in terms of people's personality, it's their conscientiousness, their openness, their resources, it's their sense of their expertise. People have to have a sense of their ability to contribute to the firm if they are to feel resilient in the face of a change to that firm. People's ability to say no, to set boundaries and say, no, this is not what I want to be good at. This is not what I'm supposed to be good at. And, with the process side, Bryn Jofson talks about people using process, or they should use process as an apprentice almost, not as something that they're being led by. So the process is like the apprentice or the associate to the individual expertise. And high quality connections are incredibly important to navigating change successfully as well. So the attitude and mindset, having a purpose and meaning, having a professional mission. So not about being idealistic, but who you are, who you want to be within a firm. Team emotions, the idea of broaden and build is coming up over and over again in the resilience literature. So you broaden what you're good at and you build from that. Now, as you broaden, you might start to kind of shave things off when you're moving from an old world to a new world, but you're preserving and you're involving people in recognizing what people are good at and what the organization wants to be strong at. And then, the good old demand versus resources. People have to have time to change. They have to have time to be developed and time to collaborate, to share and have that support. And also, good old incentive arrangements. Again, there's some evidence to show that organizations are investing in team-based incentives do better at navigating change also. So I'll share some quotes with you before I move on. And I did some work with an organization who were undergoing quite a significant strategic change, moving from one old world technology to a new world, more digital business model. And in the Irish and their Irish site, there is a lot of confusion. There is a sense that the world was changing a bit too rapidly and that people weren't sufficiently involved. So the organization had done a lot of the good things. They were surveying their employees along the way. But what they found as through these surveys that the feedback began to get increasingly negative, and also just began to get less. People stopped completing the surveys, they stopped giving feedback. And so I was brought in to talk to some of the senior team, but also to talk to some of their high performers as to how they were experiencing this change, and the high technology performers in particular. And this organization, what they embarked on was a process of organization redesign, and they brought in external consultants to remap all the business processes. And that itself kind of turned out to be a core part of the problem. So I might just read out some of my quotes, given that my PowerPoint is determined not to move with the times with me. And so the chief executive, so the chief executive here talking about, innovation for innovation's sake is of course not a useful thing. It has to be relevant innovation. That's the key point. And the relevant innovation is relevant to something, the strategy. So you start by saying, have we got a clear strategy? Do we know? Is everyone clear where are we going? That's the context within which we'd like innovation to occur. And in the absence of the picture, to get something done, everybody has to convince everybody else about how important something is, and it's exhausting. This was a new chief executive that was brought in to try and help provide clarity. So this person was brought in from the parent, and they found that they were people were just there's a lot of competing priorities because there wasn't a clear sense of where the organization was trying to go. And so the customer experience director, talking about, we don't really know what the business models of tomorrow are going to look like. We change direction, undermine trust locally, because from one day to another, you could find yourself in a situation standing in front of everybody saying, yeah, this is definitely what we'll do. This is so important. And then next week you have to communicate that, no, actually, we're not going to do this. So what I said last week, that was really important, and forget about that. And so again, undermining people's sense of their professional mission, undermining their locus of control, their sense that they can navigate that new world. And the chief technology officer talking about how, the how is complicated by the fact that what we do is very much in the IT world. It's very complex product delivery, complex customer engagement, a complex world and a competitive environment. And I can't figure out the how, because you need to bring the how into many different functions to work through and figure out how to actually do it all and join it up. And if people don't figure out the how, what we have are plausible failures. And the idea of plausible failures really stood out to me, because it really aligns with the idea of the normal accident. When people in change and all this ambiguity, you need people to have the energy, the willingness, the time to act and to respond to issues and problems that they see. And unless you get people wanting to take ownership of that kind of stuff, well, then you get your plausible failures, where it's difficult to pinpoint where things are actually going wrong. And so then the strategy director, so talking about likening it to the role of the Catholic Church in Ireland. So it's probably like when the Catholic Church said, well, we don't really need to go to confession every week. And actually, you don't need to go to Mass every week either. And by the way, you remember limbo, we kind of abolished that. So it was very confusing for people who had their religion off path. So the issue for the leaders was that they were concerned that they didn't know about where the future strategy of the firm, and as a consequence, the processes that were being built weren't helping people to realize the new world. But for individuals, it was slightly different. They weren't necessarily talking about strategic confusion, but more about how the reorganization, the restructuring that occurred because of a lack of clarity of where the organization was going, and because it was outsourcing, they weren't involved in the process, really made their working life more difficult and really compromised their sense of a professional mission and their ability to do what they wanted to do. So this was a principal architect talking about his team. And I'll just say that this was one of the highest performing teams in the firm. And they were really strongly connected, and they spoke about being an inspiration to each other, and that's what really motivated them to do the work. So they had those high quality connections, but the process re-engineering, they weren't involved in that. And so this person was saying, you know, I think we've been reorged 5 times in 2 years. I mean, how can you have faith in people when they move you so often? We were taken out of Department A. Apparently they'd done this big analysis, spent huge amounts of money on it, and at the end of it, my department was actually forgotten about. Then I think they thought they saw 1 or 2 words in the job titles that were similar to something that happened in Department B, so they moved us in there. We lasted there under our boss for about 2 months, and he just went, in the name of God, what are you doing here? Then we started getting moved around again. We stayed in Department B in a different team, but ended up with somebody else. Then we went back into a different department of Department A, and we had a couple, and we were gone out of there into another part of Department A, and we had a couple of target changes in between. So a lot of change that they weren't involved in, a lot of process redesign that they weren't involved in. And again, this is what the next quote focuses in on. Someone saying how, you know, the minutiae of what keeps this place is what keeps this place ticking over, and it wasn't taken into consideration. People are back doing what they used to do anyway because there's no one else to do it, and they hadn't thought about it that way. That can create resentment. That's saying to people, you're making it up as you go along, and you don't really know what I do, and you haven't respected me enough to ask me what it is that I do and how I contribute to the business. Now, it's this organization's credit, they responded really quickly to the feedback, and they set up new channels for consultation and communication with these people, and they managed to you know, they had their own internal feedback to respond to people's views. But it shows really how the people want to be part of change, they want to be listened to, and in all those features that enable resilience through periods of change, that is quite a bottom-up process. So when you look at the management for literature and resilience, the psychological literature and resilience, there's some key themes really emerge, and it emerged within that case study also. So resourcing reliability. So you have enough individuals, you have enough resources, people to get the job done, to the standards that people require, that you have some boundary setting that individuals can identify what they want to be good at. And increasingly you do see that within HR firms where they're organizing jobs around people's competencies. And just like that quote, that people go back to doing what they used to do anyway. And when I delved in a bit deeper on that, it turned out people went back to doing what they liked to do and what they were good at doing. That's the part of their work that they held on to in the change. And allowing people to carve out their own work is an increasingly important part of boundary setting that enables resilience. So you broaden and build with people. So you broaden the scope of what the organization is doing. You build on strengths through understanding people's views of what that looks like. The high quality connections, that is really so essential that you protect those. So just like that high performing team that got moved around a lot, they still delivered some really successful projects and really high value for the organization because of the deep connection that they had with each other and how they were, as to use their words, an inspiration to each other. And so resilience is essentially something that organizations must cultivate, must invest in. So returning to that issue of you invest in people's ability, their capabilities to design processes that allow an organization to feel confident about their ability to manage change and to be more agile. So resilience has always gone hand in hand with change, but it's increasingly becoming about preparedness for change and protecting what the organization wants to be good at. So thanks very much. I shall move away from my malfunctioning screen now and stop sharing. So and I'll hand back over to Joan. Thanks.
Jean, thank you so much for that. It was really great to get some insights from individual businesses. I have to say it's really interesting for me, the concept of, you know, having to be bought into change in terms of developing resilience. Some of the most formative experiences I have in fortifying myself and becoming more resilient are ones that I was definitely not bought into. You know, things like redundancy and stuff like that. I was not part of the program, but it has made me more resilient, I think, and I'm the better for it. So sometimes things we wanted the least have brought us the best things. And speaking of bringing us the best things, I am going to hand over to our next speaker. So Jean, thank you very much for that. Our next speaker is Goulding, enterprise agile leadership expert and author. I think well, I know I was in the Irish Internet Association when I first met Finn, because we awarded him CIO of the Year. I think he had been bestowed that honour by far larger organisations than ours at that time, but really recognised leader in terms of agility, both from a CIO, CTO perspective, but also very much in terms of leadership and organisation. So delighted to have Finn join us next. So I think Jean is going to drop off and Finn is going to hop on.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great, thanks for that introduction. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully I can get the technology to work. And oops, that didn't work. Here we go. Hopefully you can see that. And okay, I'm going to talk about transformational leadership. Hopefully I can join some of the dots here of all the previous presentations. And if you're not a leader, don't worry, because this is perhaps what your boss should be doing. So some ammunition here for you to take back to the office. As Joan said, I'm a CIO, CTO, technology person, worked in many parts of the world, very much financial services to start with, traditional organizations and banks and payment processes. I got into the dot-coms in 2006 with lastminute.com. I met Joan when I was at Paddy Power, and she introduced me as working for Willy Wonka at the time. As I'll never forget that, it was 10 years ago. And then I went back into financial services again to try and use some of the techniques that I'd learned to bring my kind of agility journey to an organization very traditional. But I've worked in the US, in San Francisco. I ran an offshore development team in Argentina, and been all over the place, really. I'm now in my own company with a colleague of mine called Hayden Shaughnessy. We're the Flow Academy. What we do is, well, we tend to do full transformations, which we call enterprise flow, but more of these days we fix or start transformations in a transformation sprint, which is like a 3 or 4 week, getting an organization around a particular area or topic that they need to transform and giving them that sort of playbook. We do also look at product development and innovation, and we run what's called the Agile Business Community. It's something that's just about to go live in a few weeks' time. It's kind of like a mini LinkedIn for people that are interested in the Agile business. So before I talk about transformational leadership, I thought, well, what kind of transformations are there? Because people get kind of confused by this topic. So an Agile transformation, I kind of see it as a change in ways of working, really to try and help you deliver products and services faster. That's how I describe it. Then digital transformation is much more around, okay, so what we need to do is bring in some digital technology into a company where it doesn't exist. So I want to build an app, I want to do AI, I want to do whatever. It's designed to help you grow new and existing markets. You hear very little about business transformation. And business transformation, for me, really is about changing your entire operating model in response to market dynamics. And that's disruption, or maybe simply to survive, which seems to be a topic at the moment. And that survival, I kind of see it in terms of where we are in the current pandemic situation. And what we've got is some stats around European organizations, about 66%, that said, actually, what's happening now because of this pandemic? I've got to speed up my digital transformation. And actually, another 92% of those organizations said, look, if we don't do it, we're going to have some really big challenges. So everybody's got transformation on their mind. Everyone's trying to jump into it right now. And I published this diagram on LinkedIn. It got thousands of views. I get about 2 or 3 on some of my articles, but this one really went crazy. I published it in March to say, where are you on the curve? Because we've just been disrupted. People were doing remote working. Procurement processes were being broken down. Laptops were being bought as fast as they could, and they were all installed. And then everyone said, right, we're just going to wait now for COVID to go away, this denial phase. Then people started thinking, well, we better protect our cash. So budgets are being slashed left, right, and center. That wasn't doing enough. So, okay, we need to reduce the workforce, or we need to sell stuff that we are no longer core. It's a very desperate down curve. And we see that as kind of where businesses are this year. And they won't be doing much investment until next year. And what will be required is some sort of vision and bravery from the leadership team, understanding what success looks like for customers. Maybe there's some existing assets in the company that were put away that can be brought out and leveraged to target innovation that customers and partners who could be in an ecosystem, and do it by doing very small projects to start with, which we call a lighthouse, and start to remodel the business. But that going up the curve requires transformational leadership. I thought I'd pose a question before we move on. What percentage of transformations fail? And this is kind of scary here because according to McKinsey, 70% of all business transformations and 85% of all digital transformations fail. Well, it's a very sobering thought, and particularly if that's what your job is about, you know. So why do they fail? I thought, well, let's have a look at this for a second. Well, I think there are four main reasons that they fail. What I call the agile IT business divide, you know, and Kevin touched on this. It's absolutely true that most organizations' focus of agile is around IT and the methods they use and the way that they use, you know, particularly new technology such as cloud. Some are doing some test and learn. It's very rare to see that. They're still working in big projects, even though they're doing agile, as it were. Some organizations have actually managed to connect part of the business to that delivery of value and that agile IT by looking at how to manage a portfolio of work in a more adaptive way. So that's reviewing that portfolio of work weekly and not necessarily yearly, and getting out of this kind of yearly budgeting thing and more budget on demand. You see some pretty decent product management in some organizations, not so much agile risk management. What we see missing is value discovery. And that's really that bit I was talking about, is how do I plan my ecosystem? How do I target innovation at new customers? What is it I've got in my toolbox that I can use? And there's very little market analysis that goes on that's upstream in an agile way, that's delivering good things for IT teams to deliver. And that's also making all the supporting organization work in that same kind of cadence. So if you keep exploiting your current business model and you never look at exploring anything new, then this could leave you really exposed. And we're seeing many organizations in that situation right now. The second thing is core platforms. A core platform would be how you're managing your customer base and the products and services that you're delivering. And actually, these are the biggest factors in transformational failure. You have a vision of this full end-to-end digital experience for your customers. It doesn't necessarily work because you're trying to you're seeking an enhanced customer experience that will actually get you more business. So there you are. I've got my vision. That's what I need to do. The challenge is, well, how do I transform this legacy estate of old core platforms held together maybe with a single view of customer or some back-end type of stuff? Then your blockers occur. There's no courage or in fact any experience in actually taking a small steps approach to getting off a platform piece by piece. In fact, the business are not very happy to give you people to do that particular work. They want the same old platforms still delivering new features. So your compromise is to put a digital front end or an app on that legacy estate. And that's what happens. This is my favorite picture of this, it's hiding away that legacy, but appearing to have a real digital capability on top. Anyway, the most successful companies actually do tackle their legacy platforms. Like Amazon. Amazon went through a massive migration a few years ago. They moved off a particular Microsoft technology. But the least successful companies just add more platforms, which brings me to complexity. Complexity itself, business has become more complex because we keep adding stuff and we never consider simplification. And actually that simplification, we sort of say to organizations, why don't you simplify? And what we find is that actually leaders have tended to not understand their current operating model and how to change it in any way. We have hierarchies which suit their needs and status, but they're not really attuned to the work or even focused on customers. And for us, the most non-complex thing to do is simplify things. And that can come by changing work processes or retiring old products and services. The more old products and services you get rid of, the easier it is to get off a platform. And to use the collective intelligence of employees to do it, that's to get the team to be motivated towards helping with these simplification activities. And actually, that's what we do when we go into organizations. We talk to lots of employees and we ask them, what's going on in your organization? How are things playing out, etc. And we feed that back to the leadership team. And it's not really, we see this all the time, that where there's poor social interaction in an organization, complexity reigns. You'll see that the management structure is seen as too complicated. There are too many platforms. I can't get a test platform set up. There are too many contractors. We're over outsourced. All these things are happening, and these are right in front of the eyes of the leadership, but they don't tend to seem to want to do anything about this. And simplification is not seen as a priority amongst leadership teams, and I think it should be. And number 4 is operating models, and I think that was mentioned as well. transformations never actually get to that end point of what that target operating model should be for a company. In fact, sometimes you end up with the old and the new in conflict. If you've got a digital garage or you've got a digital capability or an accelerator, it gets killed by the non-digital side of the organization eventually. Anyway, what's an operating model? This is not supposed to be an MBA class, but Michael Porter has this famous operating model. It's going back to the 80s. In fact, it's still being used today as what are our primary activities, what's our delivery mechanisms, and what part of the organization supports that key thing that we do. We think that needs to change. A lot of companies think so too, that they need to move away from that style, and they often get conned into, in my view, looking at things like the Spotify model or some of these scaled frameworks, which they don't fit your context. They're somebody else's context. They are companies that are starting with a digital mandate rather than having to put it on top of the legacy. So we think that something more generative is required, where you actually start to pick off part of your operating model piece by piece and modify it. And that's when we talk about how to transform it. We use a thing called transformation sprint, 4 weeks of trying to work out where you are and where you need to get to. But you don't need to do that. Anyone can work out what's my as-is state and where do I need to get to. And then what are all the things that can help me or might hinder me in getting to that point? And can I define one small step project to take me on that journey? And that's what we call the Lighthouse Project. It is a small step thing. It does help you to simplify, product development or projects or parts of a transformation that become too complex. And by scaling it down to one thing, you're able to look at that and actually see, how can I start to skill my team? And then can I split that team into 2 and then 4 and 8 to do what we call the sales division, to get that knowledge, that core capability into your organization and not use a third party to do it, because then you're going to get cultural challenges. And then you move on to the next issue. This is the one that we use. So this is what we call the flow generative model. In fact, what you look at is these are the areas where we find dysfunctionality or missing parts in an organization. So that sprint at the beginning tells us where the biggest issues are. Quite often there's no value discovery, so there's no real innovation left in organizations anymore. They're not building anything new. They're exploiting their current model. Value delivery is the IT piece I mentioned before, and there's a lot going on there. IT themselves want to be more agile, so they actually force it and actually make it happen. But the rest of the organization, in terms of core capabilities and learning mechanisms, are quite often missed out. And what you're getting to is trying to work out, where are my customers and are there partners I can actually work with to actually get me more customers as well. Working together is something that we see more and more happening right now. And remodeling, going around this a few times and picking off the areas where you've got gaps. So given all these challenges, I think transformational leadership is needed really now more than ever. So what is it? That's the question. What is transformational leadership? Well, it's not command and control. And I should just qualify this a little bit by, I've spoken to people who are in the military, and command and control is used during training to get people up to a certain level of skill set. But actually in the battlefield, they're very agile. And they have to be. They have to trust each other. They have to have communication methods. They have to be able to make decisions and be supported in those decisions. So they're very agile. But it's only in the actual training where they're much more command and control. The command and control in organization still happens. The CEO at the top sucking up all the power from the organization and away from customers. Anyway, so it's about changing your mindset. And that's part of that's recognizing the behaviors to avoid and learning how to be adaptive, how to be kind of acceptance of change and being a change agent. So it's also, I think this was mentioned earlier on, that being comfortable, not knowing everything is something that we see that leaders actually have to get comfortable with. I mean, this is a big thing. So to do that, well, let's see, what can we do with all these different things? Well, surround yourself with people who complement your weaknesses. I am rubbish at budgets and finance and all that stuff. So whenever I worked in a large organization, multi-million-dollar budgets, I made sure I had somebody with a financial head-on that could help me. It's not my core competency. It's not what I do. Just be curious about your role right now and what value does it add to the team's activities. Prior to this, there were people in senior leadership positions in offices with people coming to them all the time with status reports. That model is going way, way, way. And that you need to say, what is my role? What value does it actually add? And that's actually understanding what needs in the organization or my team that are emerging, perhaps in the organization, declining revenues, or now we've got remote working. And it requires your counsel and guidance. You don't have to roll up your sleeves and do it yourself. You give the team permission to work out these challenges themselves. And that's it. It's providing an environment where it's safe to test and learn and make mistakes. And what we find is that that's not the case, that when you make mistakes, it comes back to bite you in performance management, which is not going to help people to be innovative. And actually providing the team with all the information they need to make good decisions, that's also missing. There are certain documents where I can't share that with you as confidential, or this is an internal NDA, so I can't share it with you. That does not actually give you a good culture and actually give you a chance to make big changes. And then the team itself, if they've made decisions, you need to uphold those decisions. If you don't, you will demotivate that team immediately. They will then tell other teams, oh, well, I've just been overridden for no good reason whatsoever. And all of a sudden the culture starts to go down. And we see that the best leaders right now are coaches, they're not managers. And that's it. To be a coach, you don't tell people what to do. You ask lots of open-ended questions, let them figure it out themselves. You need to resolve conflicts quickly in teams and dispatch toxic people. The toxic people in a team destroys the team culture. And getting that people really away from it is probably the best thing you could do. And it's very hard, I know, but that's one of the things that we talk about quite a lot. And then seek feedback on yourself and how you're doing. You know, getting feedback from different levels in the organization. Am I doing a good job? Did I do that? Did I handle that very well? Sometimes senior leaders don't have that ability to get the feedback. But actually, most of all, you have to, in this day and age, be much more inspirational and motivational to your team. And that will help drive innovation and create good change. What we find at the moment is that a lot of organizations, we look at their portfolio of work, there's a lot of change that's not good. It's designed to keep people in jobs, massive programs, 3-year programs. After this 3-year program, I get to another 3-year program. It's about maintaining my job. It's not adding value to the organization or customers. And it could. And finally, some key takeaways for you. Whether you like it or not, you will be in transformation mode at some point in your career. And particularly, I think, back into this year and next year, we're going to see a lot more organizations in this space. And they do fail transformations, but I guess being aware of why might help you make good decisions, or at least being, armed with that knowledge as you go into this transformation work. And an agile business actually needs more than IT agile. I'm an IT person. I've been doing IT agile for 20 years. But it's actually much more about making customer value and actually having your whole organization focused on that. And complexity is a killer. Simplification, I don't think it's as difficult as you'll be told, but it requires some bravery and actually requires getting out there and supporting individuals to make simplification happen. And that's why we take this lighthouse approach, and it just means scaling something down, able to make the team learn the skills that will help them make transformational change more manageable. So we think that leaders need to be coaches and businesses need transformational leadership. And that's it. It's my shameless plug for our books, as Joan said. Transformation Sprint coming out in a few weeks' time, and that is our playbook on how to do what we do. And Lighthouse Thinking is coming out near the end of the year. But that's me.
Thank you so much for that, Finn. That was just great. I think it tied everything really well together in terms of different perspectives. Kevin, do you want to turn your camera back on? There you are. There's our great panel. Thank you all. I mean, I think there's so much in there. I guess, we have some questions on the thing. We're going to have a look at those. I think some of them were answered already. It's just about the slides. So we'll just, hang on, there's 2 open. A question for Finn. 2 questions for Finn. Finn, is there a correct sequence for the sprint pieces to reach the full transformation? Does it depend on the level of maturity in the pieces within the firm? And hello, Finn, you talked in the graph, you showed us about being in the desperation phase.
Yeah.
Not yet to the next phase vision, but the stock market, if it reflects expectations, doesn't seem to share your view as it is all times high. Any thoughts on that? And what is the highest risk of implementing agile in a waterfall organization? So I'm going to just close that down for a second and see if you want to answer the ones that were directly posed to you, if anyone else wants to jump in, and then I have some questions as well.
I think the last one there will be for Kevin, but the first one, yeah, there is a sequence, and it comes with working with the leadership team to work out what the key objectives are, the key goals. We find a disconnect between what they think the goals are and what the rest of the organization thinks. But there is a sequence of picking out the most impactful, the most valuable things and iterating through. And there is a step-by-step process, and be happy to share the book with anybody. It's coming out soon. But we have a process that we go through. It'll probably take too long to explain it right now. But it is about picking off the most valuable or impactful things first. And the second one about the stock market, that's great. I used to work for Paddy Power. So the stock market is, it's a big gambling exercise. I mean, what you're seeing right now is that all the money is going into the likes of Apple and organizations that are actually quite delivering things to people at home, and money is flowing away from the old businesses. But that happens every time in a stock market crash. 2008, all the money poured out of the banking and insurance and whatever sectors. It flowed into companies like Airbnb and new startups that came alive. So the money is just chasing the value of those organizations, and you're going to see some big companies that will collapse soon, and it won't be a surprise. You'll see that. But the stock market goes on. It goes this. It keeps going up.
It's not real.
No, it's not real.
No.
Buy yourself a balanced portfolio of diversified assets across lots of different companies. Put your money into it and forget it. And you'll find
that investments go down as well as up.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, that's my view.
Thank you. Kevin, did you want to take the other one?
Is this on the blockers one that came into the question? Or
what's the highest risk on implementing Agile in a waterfall organization?
Yeah. I think it's trying to do too much too quickly. I think it's been said, Finn certainly made a point of saying, look, we have got all these Agile processes and everything. And I've actually had quite a lot of challenge in unwinding some of the perceptions. I wrote a piece once called Agile has got a PR problem, and it's almost like when you talk to folks about agility, immediately the default thinking is Agile. And they think, oh no, we don't want to do that. We've tried that, or that's only for the IT team or something. And so one of the challenges actually is getting airtime to talk very openly about and practically about agility rather than Agile, right?
Well, so to belong to the English language as opposed to belong to.
I know it's a struggle. And because my background in this actually came from, how are we going to be able to adapt to all this complexity? How are we going to be able to adapt to this, the uncertainty, the pace of change, etc. Nothing to do with Agile methods and systems. But I came to agility very quickly as being one of these kind of must-win battles, at individual level, at leadership level, organization level. And then, of course, there's Agile movement, who were only in my periphery view for all this time. Because when I was in IT, it certainly wasn't Agile. So I've been working a lot in terms of trying to fuse those two ideas together, and they're not necessarily, they're very related, but they're not exactly the same. And I think one of the challenges about this Agile in a waterfall organization is getting over that initial hump about, why do we need agility at all? I remember one chief executive of an insurance company said, Kevin, 80% of this organization, I don't want them to be Agile. Because our margins are so tight, I want this thing running like a machine. But he was being a bit sarcastic, because he was kind of making the point that this Agile and agility, we have to be careful about how much of it we actually need and want for the business and for the customer. What he was making a point was, I want to make sure that everybody feels safe to put up the hand and say, we have an issue with the customer, or we have a way of doing something better. But he didn't want the whole organization obsessed with continuously changing everything just when they kind of go. So I think it was just an interesting mindset. It was just, he was displaying that sort of dilemma that I think leaders have in this agility topic, about how much of it do we need, and in what context, and why.
But also, do you think there's an issue around language as well, where people can use it deliberately? I remember having a conversation recently around, creativity driving, the importance of creativity in organizations to drive innovation. And I was quickly reminded that we didn't want creativity and irrationality and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there's accountants, and you know, there has to be some rules. I said, well, I wasn't saying creative accounting, you know, and it can be a deliberate manipulation of the language, or getting into a semantic argument when that's not the core and the essence. So my question on that to everybody is this, and I'm going to quote my own fabulous CEO, Gary. And as he reminded us all one day, that innovation is not the preserve of the young. So this is not an age-related question at all, but let us assume that leaders in organizations are possibly a few more years older than their new developer who's just started college, okay? Come out of college and started in the organization. So you've reached a certain, you know, 40 plus years of age, and you're the CEO of a large organization, and you have grown up in a command and controlled culture environment. You have succeeded based on that. I think it was, to quote Kevin, who said at the start, what got you to here won't get you to there. How hard is it? How possible is it for senior leaders in organizations to let go 20 years worth minimum of learned behavior that has to that point brought them success? To let that go and to trust in something else. Because it's one thing to say, I'm going to be a transformational leader and I'm going to be all about agility and resilience for everybody else. It has to start with them, surely. And if it does, do you agree, first of all, that it starts with them? And second of all, how hard is that to do? Is it possible? Anyone may answer first.
Well, I can start with my observation, which is I have this kind of formula, which is CEOs age, you know, and how close it is to 65, but there's a very small number of years there, and they're very change averse. So they want to protect themselves in their roles and get their pensions. But what we find is that when new ones come in, and particularly female CEOs, they really care about, you know, the company culture and what needs to change, and then inspiring people to do it. What we're finding at the moment is that companies are changing just because of the demand, because of the current situation. Because if your business model has just been eradicated because everyone's working at home, you have to do something else. So they're being driven to do it. If there's no driver to do it, then they won't do anything. Therefore, there are no bars on the windows, so you yourself should leave.
Yeah.
Okay. Jean? I'm neither agreeing nor disagreeing. I'm handing it over to the panel. I have to say our CEO does come in with a really open mind all the time, and he did say that innovation is not the preserver of the young. So, but yeah, but it is certainly a challenge, I know, in some organizations, exactly that. And that can be very frustrating from a cultural point of view, from those who are looking at the future of the organization 10, 15 years from now and hoping that it will be there. But then, of course, as you say, the option is always to leave, in that no one's in a job for life these days. And we have to say that's one of the challenges, Jean, you must certainly have seen this, is that how do you retain staff during those periods of change?
Yeah, so on the issue of the leadership side of things, I think the real challenge is that the investment in people takes a long time to be realized, and it isn't as obvious as, you know, a cost-cutting initiative, or, you know, just not spending on something, and that, you know, with established budgetary processes, with capital expenditure governance processes within firms, it can be difficult to make that case. And so, but it requires, you know, a bit more resilience on the part of HR and to argue the people advantage, because really what the evidence is showing is that less organizations are cultivating that. And in the age of technology, what that means is that if you haven't developed a capability for employees to create value, well, then you're more likely to go down the low road route of technology, surveillance technologies, automating things as much as possible, as opposed to the exploratory technologies that create new ways of working. So it is about the length of the business cycle in some way for leaders. And I think that's that's just difficult. With the generational side of things, working in a university, what we feel, and I guess what some of the research on generational, the role of intergenerational communications within firms shows that it's not as significant perhaps as as people might think, and as what a lot of commentary might lead us to believe. And we have a PhD student working within the School of Business who's looking at the university students' first experience of placement. And in fact, they're really enjoying the structure. They're really enjoying the, having this this experience around them, this being part of something successful and learning from so many people. So they really are still those sponges who want to learn from those who have proven success in organizations. But it does bring on to that issue of well-being, and somebody actually asked a question there about, the employee welfare and employee well-being. But resilience is actually all about the well-being, so that those experience of threats isn't as negative. It's not as destructive for individuals and for firms. And a lot of that is not just about the employee assistance program or the welfare programs, but really investing in people's skills and allowing them to contribute to process redesign, allowing them to articulate what they are good at, what they want their strengths to be, and facilitating that it transition into a new way of doing things.
I suppose in that sense too, just by virtue of time, and I'm not saying age because it really is not an age issue, but by virtue of time, we do build more opportunity for cultivating our resilience, because by virtue of the fact that we're all still here and we're all still standing, to a lot of extent, life teaches resilience in a certain respect, and being aware of those threats, and it's about managing threat, I suppose, to the point that you don't allow the fear of it to paralyze you, and sometimes it will knock you flat out on your self. And there is that resilience, that bounce back ability that people have to have, but it's about being able to say that there is a threat on the horizon, but I'm not going to live in fear of that, because I know that whatever happens, I can get through this, because I have built this armory, I've got this tool set, I have this agility in my tool set to allow me to deal with that. And I have also created a culture and an organization that we will all move, an all-terrain vehicle of culture, of organization, to deal with whatever lies ahead. I see Kevin nodding, so I'm definitely going to see, would that be your experience in terms of?
Yeah, and I think that organizational wide piece, I suppose one of the things that leadership responds to this is they can't get away from this issue about digital transformation equals agility kind of point. It keeps on coming up. The agility in terms of responding. They don't want, nobody wants to be a Nokia or a Sony, and that just didn't see maybe something in the periphery that was actually ended up being a torpedo that hit them. So I think from a leadership perspective, though, so they know in their heart that they've got to be agile in the sense. But yet they're also, and I have huge empathy for them really, in the sense that they've got this pressure from shareholder and from other executives about the short term and delivery, right? So one of the things when you get into one-to-one, you kind of start talking, well, what does this agility stuff mean for you? Like, and actually when you dig into their power, when you get them to talk about, you mentioned, Joan, their life, examples and stories of where they actually have been agile and successfully so in their past. Yes, they have this track record of linear and waterfall success, if you like, but they will also have nuggets of reality where they admit that they actually tacked here or there. And so there's one thing is about reminding them that actually they have this within them. And a second thing then is to say, well, where's a pain point right now? Where is the pain point? And try and get them to say, well, let's experiment. Let's, as Finn says, let's use that as a lighthouse project, if you like, in their world, in their context, to say, well, let's try some of these. Let's try something new. Let's try a different approach to solve that problem. And let's work and see. And we can even try it in parallel. So my point is, I suppose, is to meet them where they are, right? And don't be just, you're not going to win by logic. That's not going to do it. Logic, I think we're into mindset here, and we're into actual experimentation. Use the principles that we say are important ourselves: experimentation, trial and error, safe. Start with a problem that's safe and really go at it there.
You've so many things there. I have to say at one point, so I did a lot of reading on the work of an academic, Chris Seeley, in the last year or so in relation to artful knowing, that bit beyond design thinking. And it is about drawing on principles of creativity and art into organizational theory. And it is that idea of rationality, or as you just called it, logic. Ditch the logic, embrace the irrational, because, you know, the logic is what got you here will get you there. And that's not what's good. So ditch the logic, ditch the rationality, let go a little bit. But one of you, and again, I'm terrible, worst facilitator, and one of you said that, you know, that this kind of leadership is a coaching kind of leadership. Something you just mentioned there, and I have done my own course, I've done my own studies on being a life coach, executive coach, and it strikes me that one of the things that maybe leaders would benefit from not only is having a coaching style, but being coached as they go through this personally, to remind themselves to draw out, because they will tell you logically, this is, you know, in the job interview of my life as a CEO, here is everything I did logically, but actually to go back and say, actually there were times when I have shown great agility, resilience. I can do this. In fact, it is a hallmark of what got me to where I am, but I just wasn't putting the spotlight on that because that's not what we recognize and reward all of the time. And to recognize that in themselves would possibly be beneficial in terms of helping them on their own transformation journey.
I think, Joan, just to finish up at the other's end, you remind me of a point which is a shift for leaders, and I think Finn has mentioned to it, and Jean too, in terms of the environment that we're trying to create in the new world, particularly in the remote, is that it's not about you anymore, leader. It's not about what you need and what you want and what you think even is best. Your role as a leader now, it's about what the follower needs and wants. So it's about creating kind of conditions by which your followers and your people can thrive and perform and contribute. And if you kind of twist the mindset of leadership into that context, the servant leadership idea, well, number one, it starts to take huge pressure off your shoulders that actually I don't have to be the one with all the answers. And number two, I start to delegate more, etc. But I just think to your point about the art and allowing other things in and being open to the possibility that I could maybe treat the future in a different way than I have the past. I think that idea of being concerned about what the follower wants rather than what's in your swimming around your head and the pressure of always being right is a helpful tip, I guess, you know, in coaching terms. You're dead right. I think everybody, we all do need a bit of that coaching to just play with these ideas and work them out.
Cool. I think my next question is I'm going to be very selfish. I'm speaking at the Certified Professional Accountants Annual Conference tomorrow on digitalisation. You can be sure I will not be talking to the accountants about digitalisation. I will be talking to them about transformation, because there's no such thing really. The digitalisation is just the enabling technology. And they're in an interesting situation now that they have the purse strings. For a lot of organizations right now, it's centered back onto finance for exactly the reasons of the curve that Finn put up. And it's suddenly battened down the hatches. We have to be really careful where we invest money. I'm devastated. I'm going to shoot myself in the foot tomorrow if I tell them, by the way, whatever you spend on the digitalization piece, maybe with Siemens, it'll cost you 4 times that to spend it on the HR side and the people development. I'm a little anxious about breaking that to them, but I owe them the truth. Finn, in terms of your experience in the organizations that you've worked with, I mean, I'm guessing that echoes very much where you guys have been at.
Yeah, because our main business was doing end-to-end transformation and methodology implementations. And in fact, that's turned into this like 4-week help fix our transformation. And it's really about that lighthouse approach that Kevin was talking is is picking your bets, picking your kind of test and learn candidates, and if it works, then start to scale and scale your people. Don't scale consultants that come in from these big organizations, these large consultancies. That give them the old stuff to do. Have your team work on the new stuff, that core capabilities for the future. So you don't have to fail, but you have to take small steps. So it's okay to say, I want to change the world, but let's change one piece at a time. And you can then pivot as you go along. And that's what companies don't do. You know, a large consultancy comes in and says, you've got to do these 100 things, you've got to do them all at once, and you need 200 of my people to do it. And that's where it seems to go wrong, because in our world, we're quite happy to tell the CEO or whoever that they are the problem, or they are the inspiration, and somebody else is a problem. Somebody asked that question about senior leadership. And we're happy to do that because we're not looking for any follow-on work, but other organizations are more worried about the follow-on work. And we pivot them much towards to looking at value, like what's valuable? Can we get more of that value, and can we harness and grow that value? There's a question there I wanted to answer before we disappeared about agile development and being pushed into delivering stuff by an agile organization. And I probably know who that product manager is, by the way. But anyway, again, it's getting them used to value, delivering value, and not being date-driven. Date-driven doesn't work anymore. You know, you put shoddy stuff out the door, you demotivate a software development team. And we see that all the time. These are the hallmarks of where a transformation goes wrong, because the IT team says, we're not interested in that new great idea anymore. You know, good luck. And they back off. So culture and making the goal achievable is probably the two things I worry about the most.
As my German course director of many years ago said to me once, I was very annoyed about something. And he said, Joan, you've got to learn, pick your battles, big enough to matter, small enough to win.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that always stuck with me. I think it was probably circa 1996, so it wasn't any time recently. Jean, I'm going to actually ask you, probably, I think, just looking at the time, we've got a few minutes, maybe one of my penultimate questions, possibly the penultimate. You're in education. You've got graduates going through the hallowed halls, or probably online for lectures for some time now. In terms of their expectations and in terms of career and organization, you mentioned just now how much they appreciate that infrastructure that they get when they go into an organization. Where do you think the turning point is for them in wanting to then express beyond that? Where the process, as you said, is almost their, how did you describe it? That it's the apprentice and that they're learning around the process. But at what point, or how do they build that resilience as they go through their career?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting actually to see this year's cohort go through COVID, and some have talked about how it has enhanced their resilience, and like that it hasn't been the most positive experience having their resilience enhanced, but they do recognize it as that. And they do, at the start of the year, I was putting up these really great figures about low unemployment and how there was going to be the best times to graduate, and it turns out, not so much just in the course of the academic year. So at the postgraduate level, all the feedback we get on assignments is that they want the parameters, but they want discretion and some discretion in their decision making. So they want the broad parameters, they want guidance, they want everything up front as much as possible, but they do want they want to make decisions, want to have some level of ownership. In terms of where they see themselves and where they kind of want to center their expertise, I think it takes them a long time to figure things out and to figure out what they want to be good at. Even at the start of an academic year, they often express certain motivations for doing a postgrad, and they change in the course of that period, and probably likewise when they go into firms. But I think they really do appreciate decision-making autonomy and the wisdom that exists around them. And with resilience as well, like drawing on the institutional wisdom, I think is shown to enhance the resilience within teams.
I think it's interesting, just because the reason I was asking is I'm reflecting on the fact that I'm speaking at this conference tomorrow, and I've realized it's my third time addressing the CPA annual conference. And the first time I addressed them, I was head of family business services talking about succession planning when I worked for BDO. And then I got made redundant. And then the second time I spoke at the CPA annual conference, I was talking about digital commerce, digital marketing and e-commerce, because at that time I was the CEO of the Irish Internet Association. And now I'm going back for the third time to address the same cohort of people as an expert in something else again. So this idea of specializing and becoming an expert in a particular topic is really interesting to me when you talked about, you know, broadening. And I know you meant it in the team sense and that idea of agility and resilience, but it's the core skill, it would appear to me, is the ability to keep transforming and absorbing as you go through your career, and hanging on to those bits that are constant, which is people and change. Yeah.
And contributing to that, and just, you know, because you're talking to the accountants and that 1-to-4 ratio, that wasn't just, you know, increasing people's pay or spending money on headcount, but it was really about the process redesign, and it kind of brings it back to the leadership, where the organization that I was working with, I think they felt that people wanted more clarity than they actually wanted. So they thought, well, let's get this ball rolling. We'll redesign everything for people, and then that'll help with the transition. Whereas what actually happened was people felt that they wanted to be involved. They wanted to be part of that redesign, and investing in that process and those processes internally is what pays off in the long term.
But I think that's interesting when you talk about investing in that process redesign, and that's when my head goes to perfection being the enemy of good, and not doing the lighthouse project, which seems to me far more dynamic way, because you don't redesign an entire process around a lighthouse, and people will stall for a good 2 years doing a process re-engineering project, and focusing on, as you said, I remember in Woolworths back in the 90s, we had a standardization project. In other words, simplification project. We were years at it. And, you know, and it's just, it actually, that idea of do a lighthouse, don't re-engineer all the processes, prove that it works first, and let the processes rise to the top. Is that the way to do it? Maybe more than reorganize everything?
Yeah, because they're going to be new, and they're new processes. They don't work with the old business model, so you get conflict. So that's why you need to do it in a smaller way, and have the team that was mentioned earlier co-create and co-design and collaborate. And don't be told.
I think, Joan, I actually pretty hopeful about the future, I have to say. I mean, obviously it's really, really difficult now, but I think the last 6 months has done a couple of things. One is, I think it's brought agility into the mainstream. It's no longer this kind of like topic that, when we get around to it, but we're so busy delivering, you know, we'll just get on with what we know, right? So, and that I think it's been, along with resilience, I think there's a recognition that we need this competency in our, you know, in our organizations and ourselves. I also think the response to the pandemic has been quite a human one, and you do get a sense that, and I think Tom, it was in the Q&A, mentioned the fact, you know, this reference to well-being and people's welfare, etc., and rightly so, that there's maybe been an attention drawn, a spotlight being put on. How are you getting on with this, you know, and how are people coping at individual level? And this idea, I think, was also mentioned in the QA. Well, we always think that, the software people have it all worked out. You know what? They don't. They're humans too. And I remember one young software developer, and she said, I'm the least agile person in the whole company because I'm used to getting A's and H1s and top of the class. And now you're putting me into a software development team, and I hate this kind of like iteration and 80% good enough and collaboration. It does my head in. So the point is, I think we seem to be dealing with, I think now we've had an opportunity to really uncover the practical human realities of what we've been talking about for some time. And I think there's a more hopeful phase ahead, I think, in terms of leaders needing to let go, because they've had to let go in the pandemic, in remote working. So I'm pretty hopeful that actually we're going to learn from this, and because it was pretty relentless before COVID, and it wasn't exactly great for a lot of people. Yeah. So hopefully we can recreate it now and reset.
Well, you started the answer to that question with the word, you are optimistic. You have ended it with saying you are hopeful. And I just got a little message on chat there from Paul saying he hopes that I will finish on time, which is in fact now. So look, I think we could generally, I would happily sit here and chat to you guys for the rest of the evening, but I am sure that the participants would like to get on with their day. I know Paul would like me to stop. So all I can say is, Kevin, Jean, Finn, it was such a pleasure talking to you all this afternoon, hearing your presentations. I just want to thank Paul, Michael, all the gang at IVI for inviting me along again, and for everyone for listening in today. I know this will be recorded and people who were registered will be able to access it again. But for my part, thanks a million. And we'll see you all, maybe if they'll have me back for my 5th IVI webinar. There's loads of time between now and the end of the year. And hopefully I'll talk to the rest of you guys soon too. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Just before we wrap up, we don't have a webinar next week. As you know, in universities,
Oh, you got to go back to teaching people.
Got to go back to doing stuff with students. So our next webinar will be on the 27th of September, and it's going to be on BIM, not Bordi Skawara, nothing to do with phishing, but building information and modeling, and the whole concept of creating digital duplicates of physical spaces. And what are the implications of that for how you manage, maintain, sustain a building over its life cycle? So, you know, what's it like to engage with and live in?
I might be able to help you with some speakers on that.
Fantastic, thank you.
Siemens do a bit of digital twinning, you know.
Great stuff. We'll be in touch anyway. We'll be in touch regarding this, John. That's fantastic. So, again, maybe a slightly different representation of agility, in that this is about maybe managing physical spaces rather than managing how we can engage with our colleagues in achieving or undertaking tasks and activities. So thanks for joining, everyone. As Joan said, the session will be available both on our website on Monday, and hopefully before that on YouTube, if we can get it edited in time. And we look forward to seeing you all again next time for the 7th IVI webinar for 2020.
Thanks, everybody. It was great. Love to thank all our speakers. It was an excellent presentation, an excellent discussion. I really enjoyed that personally, and I think we got great feedback already in the chat on it. And thanks to everybody for attending, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.